Crit Graves is back in meta, and there's a very unique build the Koreans are spamming. LeBlanc has always been predominantly played as a mid laner, but the Koreans have been loving her in a different role. We've got all this and much more to cover in today's video as we break down 10 of the craziest new Korean builds that have been popping up in solo queue. But before we get into it, be sure to check out Skill Capped if you want to truly get better at League of Legends. We're the only service that offers a money-back guarantee if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service. We do this because our service really does work, and if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't pay. Learn more at the end of this video or click the link in the description below. Starting things off with a couple of top lane builds. Nashor's Neeko has been on the rise in recent patches. It's currently heavily outperforming Rocket Belt and Kraken Slayer, which are the two other popular rush items for top lane Neeko. And that's right, you're actually going to be rushing the Nashors, as it's a really great pickup thanks to its buffs from a few patches back. It's actually the exact same 2-item core that we see on AP Varus, as you are going to be building a Riftmaker second item. By going for a W max first, it has great synergy with the Nashor's Rush, being able to deal a significant amount of consistent DPS. You've also got a solid amount of burst potential as well, so the build is really the best of both worlds for Neeko. As for the rune page, you'll want to grab Lethal Tempo's the Keystone rune with Triumph, Alacrity, and Last Stand. The optimal secondaries are Bone Plating and Overgrowth. Jockshow and Stridebreaker are by far the most popular mythic items for Olaf, but one that many pro players prioritize and are seeing great success with is Radiant Virtue. Jockshow works really well for those extended drawn-out fights, however, Radiant is going to offer you much more upfront power. If you're playing against majority squishy champions who you can mow down before the Jockshow passive will even fully kick in, going Radiant is just going to be better value. Into a tank matchup where you're going to need a much longer fight to take them out, going Jockshow would be ideal. Definitely look to adjust to each game and realize that Radiant Virtue is a super strong option in the correct spots. You still want to rush the Ravenous Hydra and then transition into Radiant Virtue as a second purchase. Third item Death Stance works great for most games. Rune Page consists of Conqueror with Triumph, Alacrity, and Last Stand, Roll with Biscuits, and Approach Velocity for secondaries. The Koreans love their aggressive playstyle, so it's honestly not much of a surprise that they have started spamming Gale Force Graves in solo queue. Gale Force is still not as popular as Shield Bow, but it's played significantly more in Korea than in Western regions. NA Graves players are only running Gale Force in 2% of games, while the pick rate in Korea is 12%. Gale Force actually has the highest win rate for any mythic item right now on Graves, so it's definitely a very sleeper build. When you factor in the mobility from Graves E combined with the dash from Gale Force, the outplay and burst potential with this setup is super nuts. In matchups where the enemy is heavily skill shot reliant, you can get a lot more out of Gale Force than Shield Bow. Vice versa though, if the enemy has a lot of point and click unavoidable damage, Shield Bow is better value most of the time. It's all out one shot with the 2-item core as you go Gale Force into the Collector second. For runes, it's Fleet Footwork as the keystone, followed by Triumph, Alacrity, and Coup de Grace. Grab Magical Footwear and Cosmic Insight for secondaries. Korean Ivern players have decided to spice things up in recent patches, dropping Airy and running a Chad Dark Harvest rune page. Although this setup may seem a little troll, we never promote setups that don't actually have valid data to back them up, and this Dark Harvest page is actually winning more than Airy in solo queue. When you're skirmishing with Ivern, there are many ways for you to consistently proc Dark Harvest through Daisy and throwing your E on a carry. As a jungler who wants to gank a ton in the early game as well, it's not all that difficult to acquire a bunch of stacks early on. For the complete rune page, it's Dark Harvest with Cheap Shot, Zombie Ward, and Relentless Hunter. Nimbus Cloak and Transcendence are the secondaries. Now, you might be thinking, if we're going Dark Harvest Ivern, does this mean there is some full AP build to complement it? Surprisingly, no, as Korean Iverns are still building him the exact same way, with Shirelias, Chemtech Putrefier, and Redemption being the standard 3-item core. You still want to be playing Ivern as that utility champion, but with some added flair and solo carry power from the Dark Harvest. Over the past patch, a new Qiyana build has been on the rise over in Korea, and it's a bit of an assassin bruiser mix. You're still going to rush Prowler's Claw, that's a staple on Qiyana, but instead of going Ghostblade, it's Black Cleaver that the Koreans have started building way more. Cleaver actually holds the highest win rate for any second purchase on Qiyana. This build works really well when you're playing into comps that you can't reliably one-shot. If the enemy team has a tank top lane and jungle, building Black Cleaver will provide much more value for mid to late game fights. It's not just the build that is unique though, as Conqueror is being run for the Keystone rune instead of Electrocute. With Black Cleaver and Conqueror, you have a lot more extended fight power with this setup. Secondary runes are quite interesting as well, with Koreans prioritizing the Minion Dematerializer. A build gaining a ton more traction over in Korea recently, and currently Azir's highest win rate setup consists of Crown for the mythic item. Showmaker has been running this one in solo queue, and he's even taken things a step further with the uniqueness of the setup. Crown and Nashers are the two core damage items, and from then on out, Showmaker ended up building full tank. Frozen Heart was his third purchase, and Gargoyle Stoneplate after that. To back up the legitimacy of this setup, Crown is currently winning a whole 4% more than Ludens or Liandry's. This build is quite literally turning Azir into a champion that is not completely terrible anymore. Due to all the recent Azir changes, so much of his power now lies in his W instead of his Q. If you haven't been following the recent changes, you actually want to be maxing W out first now instead of Q. You need to be constantly autoing with W to make Azir work, which is why this more defensive build works extremely well, allowing Azir to survive better in those extended fights. In regards to the rune page, Lethal Tempo is the optimal keystone with Presence of Mind, Alacrity, and Coup de Grace. Second Wind and Overgrowth are what Showmaker is running for secondaries. Lethality Misfortune has been making a comeback over in Korea the past patch, and it's actually a no mythic setup. Rush item is Ghostblade, second purchase is Axiom Arc, and you round it out with a Manamune third. This setup is all about maximizing MF's ultimate power. Axiom Arc reduces 20% of your ultimate's total cooldown when a champion dies within 3 seconds of you damaging them. The mobility from Ghostblade is super nice to help you position optimally and find good angles for those multi-man ultimates. Even though this is a lethality setup, you still want to be maxing Q out first. In previous iterations of lethality MF, an E max was a thing, but it was just nerfed too hard for it to be viable again. Rune page, however, will differ from crit, as you want to take Comet for the keystone rune, with Mana Flow, Absolute Focus, and Scorch. Magical Footwear and Biscuits are for secondaries. With Kog'Maw being buffed for 13.8, there is a build going around in Korea that you would never expect, and it consists of Radiant Virtue for the mythic item. These tank variations have always been a thing for Kog'Maw, and he really only needs 2 core damage items to be an effective damage source. The first 2 items in this build path are Rage Blade and Wit's End. Radiant is purchased third, and it gives Kog'Maw some really nice durability in those late game fights. Cog R, when used alone for poke, doesn't really do a whole lot when you're playing him AD. For this reason, you'll want to hold on to your R and only use it when a team fight is about to break out. This way, you gain the extra health and buff up teammates' healing when you actually need it. It's definitely something that you will have to be cognizant of after picking up the item, because you won't want to pop R to kill a minion or look for random poke. Rune page to run consists of Lethal Tempo with Triumph, Bloodline, and Last Stand. Conditioning and Overgrowth are the way to go for secondaries. Over the past few patches, the play rate of LeBlanc's support has been steadily on the rise over in Korea, and it's actually winning at a solid rate as well. The way you build and level your skills differs drastically from what we're used to seeing on LeBlanc mid. For the build, it's a Night Harvester rush with Shadow Flame second and Wardstone third. Don't max W out first in LeBlanc support, as a Q max is how you're going to be most effective. The poke from Q is what gives LeBlanc support a lot of power, especially when laning against melee supports. Cooldown of the spell is only 6 seconds, which is quite low for a harass ability. Just for comparison, a strong laning support like Karma has 9-second cooldown on her Q at rank 1. LeBlanc's Q is even point and click as well, so there's no way for you to mess up landing the poke. The rune page high elo LeBlanc support players are seeing the most success with is Dark Harvest, followed by Sudden Impact, Zombie Ward, and Relentless Hunter. Nimbus Cloak and Scorch are the best secondaries. And our final build to round out today's video is a new one picking up some traction on Zyra recently. A few patches back, the play rate of Imperial Mandate was nearly non-existent on the champ, being played in less than 2% of games. Fast forward to now, and that number has tripled, as about 6% of Korean Zyras are building Imperial Mandate. Another very important item you need to be purchasing in order to make this setup work is Rylai's. The passive from Mandate can only be procced when you slow or immobilize a target, and with Rylai's, it guarantees you'll be proccing its passive even if you miss your E route. Zyra having so much consistent damage potential from her plants allows her to proc Mandate off cooldown very reliably. It's also a much cheaper 2-item spike, which allows you to be a bit more impactful earlier on in the game. Comet is the keystone rune with Mana Flow, Transcendence, and Scorch. Grab Taste of Blood and Relentless Hunter for secondaries. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about Skill Capped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent Challenger players into Elo Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. So there you have it guys, 10 new builds being played over in Korea that you can look to abuse for patch 13.8. Thank you all so much for watching, good luck on the Rift, and we'll see you in the next one.